So obviously, we're facing a situation where there has never been so many conflicts around the world. You mentioned Gaza, Ukraine, but you could add Sudan, the Libya, the DR Congo, and so many other conflict situations. I believe that the only way to properly address these conflicts and ultimately reach political solution is a collective approach. And you know, the UN stands for collective and multilateral responses to crisis. So in a way, it is important that we were having so many leaders, world leaders gathering here in New York for the week and having so many meetings and interaction. But what we need is for our member states to overcome their division and join forces to support political solutions that can be only achieved through collective action. So I know it's aspirational, but at the same time, it's what the UN stands for. And the UN can only achieve those goals if we have a more united membership, a more united international community able to overcome its polarization and, again, work collectively to address crisis.
The United Nations mission in Lebanon was established in the 1970s to maintain stability in the country, with the Lebanese armed forces now playing a bigger role in maintaining peace, and with the UN expressing optimism about peace in the country. How do you see the prospects for a lasting peace in Lebanon?
Well, the objective is to achieve stability in Lebanon and in the region through the full implementation of the political framework for a solution, which is the Resolution 1701 of the UN Security Council. Resolution 1701 is about reaching a point or a situation where the Lebanese authorities, the Lebanese government, will be in full control of the Lebanese territory and in full control of the weapons in Lebanon. The Lebanese government has displayed a very strong political will to work towards that objective, and the UN's role and the UN's mission is really about supporting the Lebanese authorities in those endeavors. Our force, UNIFIL, is deployed on the ground. Its mandate has been extended by the Security Council until the end of 2026, and we intend to make the best of these 16 months to actively support the Lebanese authorities and the Lebanese armed forces in their efforts.
You have been head of UN peacekeeping since 2017. How has the nature of peacekeeping changed or evolved, and what do you see as the key challenges?
Right. Well, I would say that the nature of peacekeeping is fundamentally political. People think about UN peacekeeping, and often they think about uniformed personnel with blue helmets or blue beret, and obviously these uniformed personnel are very important. But at the same time, the raison d'être for peacekeeping is supporting political efforts. Now, what has changed is the political and security environment of peacekeeping. So essentially, we have seen a deterioration both of the political environment as well as security environment, more division, more polarization across the UN membership, but also an evolving set of threats, particularly with the key drivers of conflict, such as transnational criminal activities, the impact of climate change, global terrorism, but also the negative impact of digital technology, which are enabling greater threats to both the peacekeepers as well as the population that they're protecting.
Now, UN peacekeeping operations abide by certain principles, the principle of neutrality, for instance, the consent of the parties, as well as no use of force unless that force is being used in self-defense. How would you assess the importance of these principles?
Well, I think these principles are absolutely valid. Obviously, we cannot operate without the consent of the parties, you know, the consent of the host government or the consent of the parties to a conflict. And indeed, the raison d'être of peacekeeping is to support the implementation of a peace agreement, or at least a ceasefire between conflicting parties. Neutrality, obviously, is a duty and impartiality. And as far as non-use of force, unless in self-defense or in defense of the mandate, which I believe is an important dimension, is also critical. And I believe that on one hand, that allows for UN peacekeeping to act robustly and decisively, particularly when it comes to protecting civilians, obviously protecting the peacekeepers as well. On the other hand, peacekeeping is not peace enforcement. And when peace enforcement is required in a given situation, then others should do this. Others should deploy peace enforcement operations. Those operations need to be better supported, particularly African peace enforcement operation. But I think there has to be, and there continues to be, a very clear distinction between peacekeeping and peace enforcement.
What about peacekeeper training? What kind of progress have you seen? And what kind of contribution has a country like China made? Of course, China is deeply involved in peacekeeping operations around the world.
Training is absolutely critical. And training is constantly evolving because the environment, as I was saying, is constantly evolving. So we need to add more training on things such as digital technology, counter IED, counter drones, lots of other things that are, increasingly important in peacekeeping. And this is why the role of member states, and particularly those with important capacity, such as China, is absolutely vital. I mean, I have myself visited the training center, both the People's Liberation Army Peacekeeping Training Center, as well as the Chinese Police Training Center. I have seen a number of modules and a number of Chinese, but also international peacekeepers benefiting from training provided by these institutions in China. This is absolutely vital, and I believe that we will continue to need the support of China and other member states with significant capacities to meet the needs that we have in terms of training.
The United Nations is now commemorating its 80th anniversary, the 80th anniversary of its founding. But this comes at a time when there's vigorous debate within the organization and outside about reform, especially reform of the Security Council. There's also tightening budgets that you are facing. There's also non-payment of dues by some countries. How do all of these impact peacekeeping operations?
Well, obviously, there is a need for adaptation and reform, and that is the purpose of the Secretary General's UNAT initiative, which is about eliciting more efficiencies and more, frankly, more coherence across the UN system. On the other hand, when it comes to the question of finances and contribution, what we really expect from member states is consistency. Because on the one hand, the mandate of peacekeeping operation is decided by member states, through the Security Council in particular. And therefore, since member states are deciding and really creating and extending mandates of peacekeeping operation, what we expect from them is consistency in terms of them also paying their contribution to peacekeeping. Now, reform is obviously very important, and it is important at different levels. You mentioned reforming the Security Council. I believe that our Secretary General has quite often stated the importance of such reform, but obviously it's for member states to decide on that and to decide on the modalities of such reform. But you have heard, I believe, our Secretary General quite often stating the importance of adapting multilateralism to today's global realities.
So those are some of the major challenges. But looking back on 80 years of the United Nations, what do you see as some of its major accomplishments?
Well, I think that it's clear that the list of countries that have been successfully supported by peacekeeping operation in achieving stability is quite long. You could mention Timor-Leste in Asia, or Cambodia. In Africa, you have Sierra Leone, Liberia, Cote d'Ivoire, Angola, Mozambique, Namibia, many El Salvador in Latin America, and I could mention many more countries. So it's a long list of achievement, which I believe resulted from the support that was provided by peacekeeping operation, but also the implementation of peace agreement in those countries. And implementing peace agreements requires not only the active involvement and positive involvement of the parties to these agreements, but it also involves and implies a strong, united support from the international community as a whole. And I'm saying this because today, with the divided international community, achieving political solutions is much more difficult. And I believe that this is probably our number one challenge also to peacekeeping, because peacekeeping is created and exists to support the achievement of political solutions.
Now, as I said earlier on, China plays an important and big role in peacekeeping operations. How would you assess the Chinese role?
Chinese role is very critical and very important in many ways. I believe that, first of all, the political support that is extended by China to peacekeeping is always been very strong. And I have seen that again very recently when I was in China last week. So the political support is critical. But in addition to that, China provides UN peacekeeping with very effective and professional peacekeepers. It's one of the most important troop and police contributing countries to peacekeeping, with more than 1,800 peacekeepers deployed in many missions. And then you have a role of China as an important financial contributor, the second largest contributor to financial contributor to peacekeeping. And finally, you mentioned training and capacity building, which I believe is also very critical. Capacity building and training, not only to Chinese peacekeepers, but also to many other many peacekeepers from other countries. And I think that is really a very important contribution that China is making to enhancing the effectiveness of peacekeeping.
The CGTN documentary Blue Helmets, No Borders highlights the courage and sacrifices of United Nations peacekeepers. How important is it for such stories to be told globally, and how can they strengthen your operations?
I think communicating on the achievement of our peacekeepers, their dedication, their commitment, the commitment, dedication of Chinese peacekeepers, the service that they provide to communities at risk, to building peace, to preserving ceasefire, that is absolutely essential. And I believe that we never do enough of that. We need to convey the positive stories about, what peacekeepers, what difference is being made by our peacekeepers every single day. Every single day they protect hundreds of thousands of civilians, they protect ceasefire, they support state building, capacity building, and all of this, I believe, needs to be told and needs to be conveyed to the public at large.